Good afternoon to everyone at today's public hearing of the Vetting Commission established under Law Number 65 on the external evaluation of judges and candidates for judges of the Supreme Court of Justice. I'm Scott Bales, the chair of the commission, and I declare this session open. The hearing is being conducted under the Commission's Rules of Organization and Functioning as part of the evaluation process. The subject of today's hearing is Vladislav Schibin, a candidate for the selection and evaluation of Board of Judges and for the Disciplinary Board of Judges. The evaluation in relation to Judge Schibin was carried out pursuant to Law Number 26 on some measures related to the selection of candidates for the position of member of the self-governing bodies of judges and prosecutors. Judge Schibin has been a judge at the Balti Court since 2018 and subsequently at the Chisinau Court since 2023. He previously worked as a judicial assistant at the Chilcana Court, the Chisinau Court, and the Supreme Court of Justice. Judge Schibin, welcome.
Good afternoon and good to see you.
I'm joined by four other commission members. To my left, or your right, is the Vice Chair, Andre Bevel. To my right is Commission Member Lillian Ansu. And further to my left are Commission Members Lavle Perling and Yuri Gatskin. The Commission is also assisted by members of its Secretariat, and you may note in the room there might be some members of the public or the media. The hearing will be conducted with interpretation between Romanian and English. To allow for accurate interpretation, I ask that everyone speak clearly and slowly. Proceedings are also being recorded. The recordings of the Commission's public hearings generally will be available online at the Commission's website, www.vettingmd.eu, within 3 days after the hearing. I will start by briefly reviewing the evaluation process for Judge Schibin. The Commission initiated its evaluation on December 6, 2023, by notifying him by email and asking him to complete and return an ethics questionnaire and the financial declarations required by Law Number 26. Judge Schibin returned the completed declarations and questionnaire on December 13, 2023. As part of evaluating a subject's ethical and financial integrity, the Commission also obtains information from many other sources, such as the National Integrity Authority, the State Fiscal Service, the General Inspectorate of the Border Police, other public institutions, financial institutions, and open sources. The Commission assesses the information it obtains for its relevance and reliability. On the 21st of February 2024, the Commission asked Judge Schibin to provide additional information by February 28th to clarify certain matters. He provided answers and documents within the set deadline. On March 28th, 2024, the Commission asked Judge Schibin to provide additional information. After the extension of the deadline, he provided answers and documents on April 5th of this year. On April 11th, the Commission asked a third set of questions to Judge Schibin. After an extension of the deadline, he provided answers and documents on April 17th, 2024. On May 31st, we notified Judge Schibin that the Commission had finalized its investigation and had identified some areas of doubt about his compliance with the ethical and financial criteria. We also invited him to attend today's hearing. According to Article 30, Paragraph 2 of the Commission's evaluation rules, if the Commission has doubts based on the information collected and reviewed about the subject's compliance with the integrity criteria, it will send the subject a written notice identifying all of its doubts and setting a hearing at least 2 days after the notice to discuss them. Judge Schibin, let me begin by asking, do you have any additional corrections or additions to the answers you've provided to the Commission's request for information? And let me say first, we did receive the information you sent to the Secretariat, I believe, last evening. So apart from that information, are there any other additions or corrections you would like to make to the information you've supplied to the Commission?
Deci am remis
So yesterday I have sent the explanations on the questions that were preliminary raised, and I have sent the answers I managed to collect. Currently, I am looking for another document, but I don't have it yet. So currently, I have nothing additional to present.
What does the other document concern?
In that document or notice, it is said, or it is referred to the year 2009. In the navigation from the 31st of May, it is said that the flat where I have the residence of domicile on Constructor Riller Street, it is spoken about this. And it is also the explanation of the real estate, the explanation in the first round of questions saying that the procurement was done not in 2009 but in 2007. So I am looking for the receipt dating from 7th of August 2007, but I cannot find it. I do have it, and if you will allow me, if later on I find it, to present it to you. Why do I mention about this receipt? Because in the conclusions mentioned in the notice to the hearing, it is referred to payments of about 250,000 lei in year 2009, which led to deficit of minus 180,000 lei for 2009 during the assessed period, when actually these expenses were incurred 2 years earlier. And this actually will change the balance between the income and expenses for a good period.
All right, well, we may come back to the timing of the purchase of the flat later in the hearing, but if you are able to locate a copy of the receipt, please do send a copy to the Secretariat so that that's part of the evaluation file. Let me also ask, is the information that you provided in the 5-year declaration and in your answers to the ethics questionnaire on December 13th, 2023, is that information still accurate as of today?
Well, once I put them there, they are valid. Even though...
So nothing's changed?
In terms of my family situation, no.
Well, I'm talking generally about, in particular, your answers to the ethics questionnaire. Has anything changed in terms of the accuracy of those?
I cannot change them because I've already sent them. So it was the way I worded them at the time.
Well, would your answers be the same today?
With a little exception. I indicated in the questionnaire or in the declaration from December 2023, I said that I lived permanently in that flat on Constructor Riller Street. But actually this included some perturbations or some disruptions in the process of living there. This is a small clarification. The other, everything remains the same.
All right. So members of the Commission will now ask some additional questions. We will try to keep our questions short and to the point. We ask that you try to keep your answers short and to the point as well. And Commission member Lavley Perling will start the questions.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Candidate. I would like to ask from you about three issues. First of all, non-declarations. The second, differences between your income and expenses. And the third group of questions are related material what you provided tonight. Maybe the first general question, why you decided to provide us the material and new information tonight, not before?
Din păcate, volumul de lucru care am
Unfortunately, the workload that I had and I do have, because they impede me to do this. I worked on examination of the materials. I've checked some information that I have understood do not consistent or do not correspond to the reality. I made some requests. I had to go to my mother's place to check with her to make some verification. And in the last 2 days, I managed to put this in written because there's a lot of calculations, figures. So in the last days, I felt like an accountant. I'm really sorry this was in the last day. But I also have my family situation and my work situation. I had a lot of work to do. So previously I've been a little bit in leave, and now I came back and solved the issue.
Thank you. And now let's talk about declaration. We will talk about bank accounts, your mother's apartment, and also failure to submit declaration. The first issue, under Article 8, Law number 1264 from 2002, in 2012, you should have submitted a series of declarations to the National Integrity Commission in your capacity of judicial assistant at the Chisinau Court of Appeal. Therefore, since you were appointed in the capacity in October 2012, you should have submitted a declaration at appointment in October or November, within 20 days of appointment date of 2012, pursuant to Article 8 of the mentioned law. Likewise, since you were dismissed in October 2012, you should have submitted a declaration at dismissal in October or November again of 2013. The Commission didn't identify any of the declarations. Furthermore, you didn't submit the declaration 1 year after your dismissal, as required, the paragraph. And now my question, please explain why you didn't submit the declarations.
Da, precum am indicat și în
So, as
explicațiile
I
scrise,
mentioned in my written explanations,
inițial, la angajare,
initially when I was appointed in 2012 at the Court of Appeal Chisinau, the appointment process took a little bit of time. It was 15 days that I worked that, but I had the order of appointment 15 days after, so I worked 15 days without being officially appointed. And second, the submission of declaration at that moment in time was done not like today with using the electronic signature or submission via on electronic portal. The declarations were collected by a specific employee within the employer entity. And unfortunately, I was then at the beginning of my career, let's say so, in a public position. I really did not know about this, because for me this would not have been an issue to submit the declaration. I have presented all the documents I was requested to by the employer: CV, criminal record, medical certificate, any other documents requested. All of them I have presented to the employer. Yes, that's my mistake. I did not get familiarized in depth with the legal provisions. I admit, I recognize this. But this actually did not influence the evaluation process, because all the materials I had, I presented them to the Commission. The Commission has identified the information from the sources existing with the private or public entities. Later on, I found out about this obligation of submitting a declaration at appointment. This is one thing. And second, at that particular time, it was not so strictly mentioned or referred to or used to enforce the submission of declaration. The employee who was in charge to collect the declaration did not request it from my side, which he should have done it. Later on, when there was a case to submit the annual declaration, because I knew about this fact, I submitted this declaration. I did not conceal anything in this regard. I submitted it on the 20th of March 2012. And finally, in the end of, or in 2013, I was not dismissed. I quit my position on my own initiative in relation to the fact that I was admitted for studies in the Institute of Criminal Justice. At that moment, I had a lot of workload. Well, there was a lot of court rulings issued. And after I quit my position, I created or drafted a series of liquidation forms requested by the employer, but again, the employer did not inform me about the fact that I needed to submit this declaration. I acknowledge this was my fault. I had to submit it. Later on, I submitted this declaration, and just passing by accident, passing by the Court of Appeal, I went to that employee from the court who had to collect those declarations. That person was not at that moment at work. I did not expect for them because I didn't know when they will come back. So I left it on the table, thinking that he will take it and register. But finally, this declaration was not submitted. Finally, yes, I admit this was my mistake. But I believe that this fact actually did not disturb the activity to identify my incomes. I have identified, at least in the explanations, in the answers, the incomes, the goods I had. This is it.
Okay, so as I understand, it wasn't only one mistake, it was several mistakes. You accept it? Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, let's take next topic, your apartment. According to the electronic registry of real estate, e-Kadaster, during the period 2009-2013, you had property right owner of apartment in Chisinau. In your 5-year declaration submitted to Commission, you stated that even after 2013, when your mother became the owner, you continued to live in it until 2018, when you were appointed as a judge of a Balti Court and had to leave it. Thus you were effectively having possession right and use rights over it. And by law, you were requested to declare that real estate, both as being held in ownership as well in possession, but you didn't declare. Again, please explain why you didn't reflect this apartment in your declaration submitted to the National Integrity Commission.
The respective apartment was initially bought in my name, but from the funds of my mother. During the period I was a student. This was a contract of investment. After taking it in use 1.5 years after, in 2009, so the contract was from 7th of August 2007, but we started to use it really in 2009. And almost from there, it dates the period when I registered my domicile as an owner. Later on, as a result of some personal conflicts, I sent the right of ownership to my mother via a bilateral contract, but my domicile remained there. At the first stage in 2013, I also left the apartment with the person I lived with. In 9 months, about 9 months after that, I came back and kept living there with that person and with my cousin Sârbu Sergiu, who kept living there till 5th of April 2024 this year when he died. So he was taken basically out from that apartment. For the domicile, in that case, we have some nuances. So I said that there was a visa of domicile registered from 2009 or 2010 till this moment. I do not deny it. I have the domicile there, but in some periods of time, I did not live there for several months. I lived with some people, several people, with whom I had a personal relationship. Last time when I slept in that apartment was 8 years ago, but the domicile still remains there. But currently I don't have even a key from this apartment. In terms of declaration, I was guided by the fact that I had to declare the right of ownership. So effectively, I did not have a contract, direct contract with the owner, my mother, on that apartment, or a rent contract or habitation contract, and moreover, according to the legal provisions I referred to in my written explanations, the right of ownership with the attributes usage, ownership and use, which are attributes of the ownership right or the right of habitation. These are real rights. These are deriving from the moment when the real estate property is registered with the registry, but there are some exceptions which are not involved or which do not refer to this case. Probably it would have been better to declare this in order to avoid this problem. But in all the documents, submitted to the Superior Council of Magistracy, this address was indicated. I did not deny this address as domicile. I have it still now, even though I live with my wife for a long time in her apartment, but my domicile still is in that apartment.
But still, we talk about the period 2013-2018, and you said that several months you didn't live there. When my question is, please still clarify the legal nature of your right to live in your mother's apartment during the period 2013-2018. Yeah, I understand all the relationships, but as a lawyer, could you please explain us nature of a right to live in this apartment?
Well, the owner basically did not have an objection for me to live there, but I did not have a contract or a verbal or written agreement. We did not sign one. And plus, the main lady was my cousin. I was coming there periodically, and moreover in 2015 there was a big flood, and we had this issue with long repair works, renovation of the apartment, and during that period it was not possible to live there. Possibly from your perspective, I admit maybe it would have been better to indicate that domicile in order to avoid the problems, but according to the legal documents, I had no right on this apartment. There is no document stating some right of mine on this apartment, neither renting contract or habitation contract, none of this. Yes, that's the apartment of my mother.
La noi este foarte frecvent întâlnit
And with us, it is very typical, quite frequent when children live in the properties bought by their parents. And more recently, we had the situation of Madame Gavrilița, former prime minister, who lived in her parents' house, and she still failed to declare this. So it is understood that there is a non-official, non-written agreement
Era mult mai bine dacă declaram
for this. Maybe it would have been better to declare this,
Nu avem drept pe apartament.
but I had no right on this apartment. This is the real
Okay,
situation.
and still short answer, please. What is the reason not to declare it?
Am considerat că nu am un drept
I believed
legal care să
that I had no legal right to declare this apartment, which was enshrined in the legal documents, and which would generate the necessity of a declaration.
And you believed, what about now? You just said that you believed, and what is your opinion now? Do you still believe it? Or you have changed your mind?
În condițiile în care se
Well,
identifică
under the
și
conditions
de
where a
neglijențe
series
care le-am
of
admis,
inconsistencies
cred că
are
pentru
identified
mine nu
that
era
I
o
have in that
problemă să
moment.
declar. Adică
Well,
chiar
for
nu
me
este
at that
problemă.
moment, there was not an issue to declare. Currently, I can declare absolutely every asset, every good I have or my relatives have to avoid such issues. Because let's say I lived for a period there, for another period I lived in another dwelling with the cousins. In the same reference period, I lived with a few months with a cousin. I lived in the house of an aunt for a few months on Moscovei Street. So in different periods, I lived in different places.
Și chestia dată, adică chiar îmi vine greu să
And for me,
să o scriu în
it is
baza
hard for me
ce
to
eu
put in
am.
written
Pur și simplu mi-a
based on
permis
what
proprietatea.
reason I lived there.
Asta
Basically, the owner allowed me to do
Dar
this.
recunosc mai bine
Yes,
scriu
I
ca să
admit
evit oricare problemă.
I should have
Asta este.
declared this in order to avoid issues. This is it.
As here we talk about apartment, I have a question about the investment agreement regarding the apartment on Constructorial Street. Oh, what was the name? Constructorial Street. Yes. Do you have this investment agreement? And as you provided us document at midnight, could you provide us this agreement too?
Deci, într-o mapă care se păstra la
Well,
mine
in a
pe
file
net,
that I
este
have
contractul
kept
de
for a long
investiții
time, I have the investment
care am
contract
indicat
and
la
that
început.
receipt I mentioned about in the beginning.
Am rugat-o zilele curente
I
pe mama să
asked
verifice și
recently
nu
my mother to
nu am
check this.
identificat, dar eu sunt sigur că este la dumneavoastră.
She
Zilele
says she
trecute
did
să
not
merg
find
și
it,
să
but
mai
I'm sure
caut că
it's
el este
it's
pe
kept
contul de
with her.
investiții.
So I will the next days I
Și
will
îmi pare
go
rău, poate nu
to
am
look for
încercat
it.
să-l caut mai devreme,
I am really
pentru
sorry
că
I did not look for
el,
it earlier,
trebuie să fie și la Agenția Servicii Publice.
but it should
Un contract
have
datat
it should be
7
also with the Agency of Public
2007.
Services. It's a
Contractul
contract
investițiilor în construcții.
investment in construction
Bunului-
from
Could
2007.
you provide it us?
O să depun efortul ca
I
în
will
zilele
do my
cât
best
curând să
for that in the
să
next
o
days to
prezint, dacă
come.
nu
I
acasă,
will
la
present
cadastru.
it. If I don't have it at
Adică
home,
să
I will go
obțin
to the
să o prezint.
cadastral agency to present it to you.
Please, by tomorrow.
Da, desigur.
Ms. Vasan. Thank you. Next question, let's talk about bank accounts. In the annual declaration for the year 2012 submitted by you to the National Integrity Commission, you only reflected 2 out of 10 bank accounts active at the moment of submission. And again, the same question, please explain why you didn't reflect the other 8 bank accounts, all for pursuant Article 4, it was necessary.
La acel moment nu
At that
citisem
moment,
legea plină de
I
declarare.
have not yet
M-am
read
condus
the law
de,
on declarations.
hai să
I
spun
was
așa,
guided
sfaturile sau informații
let's say, by the advice or
de
information presented by the employee that was collecting these declarations at the workplace. So in the explanation at that moment guided me to indicate at that moment the accounts that were essential, meaningful for myself. So I indicated the accounts that were for deposits with higher amounts. I did not even indicate the contract of service for salary receiving. I think I failed to declare it because the amounts were not significant, and the money, as I received them, I was withdrawing them. And for me, it was surprising how much accounts I had. I did not think I had so many, but checking at home the information in several contracts, I checked and found open accounts for one single transaction. And although on those accounts I did not have any funds at that moment, or they were small amounts, or these accounts I thought were closed. Because when I asked the bank officer, they told me that 6 months after being inactive, they are closed. I opened 2 accounts at ProCredit Bank, I tell you the name, in order to get the reimbursement of taxes obtained through Work and Travel Program from United States in 2008. And after taking those funds from those accounts, it was about $400. I did not use it, so these accounts remained inactive. There were other accounts, for example, the banks were doing some promotions for offering some types of bank cards, but with some facilities or discounts for the young people. This was with Moldova Agro Bank, if I am not mistaken, it was Card Avanti, and also with Moldinkom Bank. And those cards I took in order to buy a phone from a foreign website.
Respectively, I did not have transactions that were very meaningful. They were limited to one transaction, and further they were no longer used. I thought that they were inactive, that the balance was 0 or close to 0, and this is why, based on the explanations of my colleagues, so to say, I did not declare them. I did not have an issue to declare that they were accounts that had 0 money on them.
Oh, okay, sorry, but you were in position of judicial assistant, and could you then explain what action you took in order to identify all your bank accounts and identify that your declaration could be provided as accurate as possible?
I did not put in all necessary efforts to identify all bank accounts that I had at that moment, because this would mean that I would have had to travel to all banks to check there and to offer information that was paid for. The declaration had to be submitted fastly, and indeed I did not have the due diligence in order to fill in this declaration. Later on, I understood how serious things are, but at that moment, for myself and for my colleagues, this declaration was like a formality. Unfortunately, I understood this much later, and I cannot fix this mistake now.
I don't have more question about the declaration. I would like to continue with inexplicable wealth. Maybe my colleagues have a question about the declarations. No, thank you. Before we continue inexplicable wealth, you sent us at night your calculations, and you used Google searches. Could you please tell us why you believe that Google searches is more reliable than SIP as official methodology?
În răspunsul 3 la runda de întrebări, eu am
In
dat
the
explicații la
third
cheltuielile
answer, in the rounds of questions, I mentioned the expenses I had when there were mentions about unjustified incomes. I mentioned that both myself and my mother, because we were both assessed,
duce un mod de trai destul de
have
econom. Și acele cheltuieli care s-au
a frugal living style, and the expenses that were mentioned are higher. This mention I made was not taken into consideration, and there were mentions of the information from the National Bureau of Statistics. After checking this, I indicated Google because in Google I looked for that term that was used in the notice, the average consumption expenses, and I saw the information from the NBS. Therefore, I used the data from the NBS statistica.md. And I did not find the data that was used in the notice for calculating the average consumption expenditures. And I looked, so I had screenshots from this website, statistica.gov.md, where the average expenditures, monthly expenditures, are indicated. This is the term used by the Commission in the notice and in calculating the expenditure. I mentioned Google just because a simple Google search offers this information from the MBS. And I presented for each of the years mentioned this coefficient that is indicated by the NBS on their official site. So by applying the method the Commission used, I did not find this information that was offered by the Commission in the notice on that site. So these are average expenditures. For example, 2009. So these are average consumption expenditures, and I used this information. And I mentioned this because there were doubts that arise from the fact that for many years the average expenditures that were calculated were represented a very high amount, for example, for 2012. And after applying this coefficient from the statistics site, so I used this, I multiplied it by 2, just like the Commission did, and then I multiplied it for 12 months. And in my information, I mentioned the amounts resulting on page 2. In my opinion, there's a table for the consumption expenditures that I calculated based on the information from the NBS. This is public information multiplied by 2, multiplied by 12 months, and the information calculated by the Commission. And the total difference is 375,739 lei. This is a substantial amount, and this is the amount that is referred to in the notification regarding the inexplicable wealth. So, depending on how the consumption expenditures are calculated, one can determine the difference between the incomes and the expenditures.
Judge Schibin, I want to make sure I understand what you've just said. I heard you say that what you did is you went to the website for the NBS and you tried to calculate yourself the estimates that the Commission had made for average expenditures. Is that correct?
No.
So I understand you're not disagreeing with using the NBS data on average expenditures. You are just questioning whether the commission calculated it correctly.
Формула de calcul este
The formula for the calculation is the same for me and for the Commission. What was calculated, so these figures for the consumption was multiplied by 2 persons by 12 months, and this was done for each year. However, this figure that varies from year to year, based on the information that I found on the official site of NBS, differs from the figure that was used by the Commission. Because, well, I don't know the figure from the Commission because in the notice we have the total amount, so it was after multiplying by 2 and by 12. So if we calculate the other way around and divide by 12 and by 2, we can find it. And if between the first years the figure does not vary so much, later it varies and it generates differences in calculations from 10,000, 12,000, 13,000 up to 93,000 difference between the amounts calculated by myself and by the Commission, so based on this coefficient. So what's important is the coefficient used for the calculations for each year. According to the formula proposed by the, so I calculated also based on the formula offered by the Commission and by the NBS. So I made these calculations and I did not find the same amounts that the Commission indicated, because the difference is significant.
Okay, thank you.
Cifrele.
And by the way, I mentioned the figures on the first page of my written explanation, and the same figures are found in the screenshots that I annexed from the site of the NBS. One question, Mr. Schibin. Did you use a specific indicator depending on the urban area or the number of members in the family, or you took it from the database of the NBS? You generated a simple indicator which is related to the country average. I think it is the medium value, probably. The medium expenses per person per year, but you did not use an indicator related to the urban area or the place where the person or the family is living, depending on the number of children, depending on other factors, because in the data of in the database of the NBS, there are many indicators. The difference is not essential, but the Commission uses for calculating these amounts different indicators to have a more accurate calculations based on the living standards of the candidate. Let's say if you are living in an urban center, we are using the calculations for the urban area. If you are living in the rural area, we are using the indicator for the rural area. So what indicator did you use? An average indicator, the country average. Yes, let's say so. But the statistical data, which can be easily manipulated, is one thing, and the reality is something different. For the reality, I presented the information. I cannot do anything if you don't want to accept it. Because let's take an example. The expenses for 2 persons can be different. One person can use the taxi, others cannot, may not. For example, I've used the taxi 5 times in my life. On each occasion, I tried to save money. My colleagues that are transferred from different districts,
are traveling using their personal cars, which costs approximately 500 lei, and I use the bus, which is approximately 50 lei. I and my mother are trying to live modestly, and when we talk about inexplicable wealth, and if the incomes are based on real savings, because you do not afford to buy what your neighbors afford to buy, this can be upsetting, because it's not fair. You do not buy these things, you save money, and later your calculations are done based on the general statistics, and it turns out that you have inexplicable wealth, and this is something that it bothers me. In the notice, you mentioned in point number 7 that the indicator related to the consumption expenditures is made up of other 12 sub-indicators. Could you tell us if you have any objections, or maybe you did not have expenses registered for any of these 12 sub-indicators? I think everyone has certain expenses. We are discussing about food items, alcoholic beverages. I don't really use that. Tobacco, nobody in my family uses tobacco. But in terms of alcoholic beverages, I use them seldom. And what we have is beverages that are produced by our relatives in the countryside. You can come and see that we don't have bought beverages. If we need to buy clothing or shoes, we go to shops where the prices are lower, because you can go to Waikiki to buy something cheaper, or to go to more expensive brands, because I've never used those brands. I consider the prices are unjustified. I think these are general criteria that are applied, tailored, depending on the person, depending on the family.
Okay, let's continue. Inexplicable wealth. According to Commission data, in 2010, 2013, 2014, and 2015, your expenses exceeded your income with 62,000 lei, 74,000 lei, 73,000 lei, and 164,000 lei, respectively, thus forming a total inexplicable wealth of 375,739 lei. First of all, let's start with apartment. You provided us today at midnight documents that you purchased the apartment in Constructorial Street in 2007 and not in 2009. Could you please open the circumstances, how you purchased the apartment, what was the price, where the money came from, and how you paid for that apartment, in one part or in different part, and what was the time frame for the payments?
I will start with the circumstances of the objections related to inexplicable wealth for 2010, 2013, 2014, and 2015.
We continue with this topic.
Okay, about the apartment. This apartment, so this was an investment contract because this building was being reconstructed, some annexes were built. The contract was signed on the 7th of August 2007. At the signing, we had the administrator of the company, myself and my mother. The person who paid the
money was my money. This was from the money that she had saved up to that moment. And she also had a small support from my grandmother, Petreanu Ana. The amount was approximately 70,000 euro. This was paid in Moldovan lei according to the exchange rate of the National Bank. This was the cheapest apartment that was on the market at that point. Plus, the building was being renovated. So this was from the savings that my mother had. She was 54 at that moment. Normally, if you are working honestly, by the time you are 54, you can save some money. Besides, there was some money. I don't exactly the circumstances. This was sent by my grandmother. We went to the village and she gave it to us as a loan. Later, in 2008, my mother gathered that amount and wanted to pay back my grandmother, but my grandmother said, keep that money, you don't need to repay it. And soon, in 2 days, she actually died. She was in her last days and she did not need money anymore. Therefore, the money was or the expenses were incurred 100% by my mother in cash. But because she wanted me to have a place to live in Chișinău, to have a residence there, because it would help me to get a job, because there were some aspects related to the residence, she wanted to buy this apartment because by that time I lived with some relatives and it wasn't very comfortable.
So as I understand, you used the money of your mother savings, most of all.
Exact, 100%.
Yes, 100%. It was her decision to register the apartment on my name, and this is why I signed the contract. Later, in 2012 or 2013, when we had some disagreements, I gave it back to you. I said, let's register it in your name so that we don't have issues. And this is what we did based on sale-purchase agreement. The value was formal, €1. We had this agreement because at that moment it was possible to have a simple written contract. You did not need to go to the notary public to pay additional taxes, because a donation would have involved going to the notary public and expenses.
But when you paid and how you paid? I mean, was it in one part or different parts?
La ce dată vă referiți?
At what moment are you referring to? When I invested in the construction of the apartment?
În data de 7 august 2007 a fost achitată suma integrală în numerar, circa 250.000 de lei.
Sorry, we lost translation.
Posibil mai mult, posibil mai puțin.
Approximately 250,000 lei. The cadastral value was 244,000, but I think the value was higher. It was one sum in cash paid at the signing of the agreement. And the contract and the receipt were being kept in the apartment because I'm not there for very long, so I think my mother took it to her place because we can't find it.
And we talk about now about year 2007.
Da.
Okay. But
yes,
let's talk about year 2010. In the third round of questions and answer, you stated that you and your mother had savings. We have not forgotten that you had paid for apartment, yeah. But now we talk about 2010. So, kept in cash at home. The Commission established that in the years prior to 2010, your household recorded a positive balance. It was 79,772 leis in 2008 and a negative balance of 181,728 lei in 2009. Their cumulative value was 101,956 lei. Furthermore, considering the remaining negative balance, 101,956 lei in 2009. If there were any saved funds from the previous period, they should have been used to cover this inexplicable wealth. Now it's especially important that you just told us that you already used the savings and money for your apartment. Could you please explain us how did you cover this negative balance of 62,732 leis in 2010 in these circumstances?
Deci, în calculele care le-am expediat aseară,
In the calculations that I sent last night, not at midnight, but at 9 p.m., I presented the way I calculated this. The funds, at least in our family, are not all spent in the year when they are obtained. Throughout the years, starting 2007, after the purchase of the apartment, my mother, from her income, starting saving again, initially in order to pay back the money from my grandmother, so her mother, because she borrowed some money when the apartment was bought. So on the 29th of November 2008, she wanted to give it back. My grandmother said no, and then my grandmother passed away on the 30th of November. This was the first saving that she was keeping in cash. It was meant to pay back the loan from my grandmother.
In which year? Could you please repeat when exactly it was?
Deci, eu remarc,
I want to point that this loan was not paid back. So the money was saved in 2008. So this was on the 29th of November, and my grandmother died on the 30th of November. So starting August 2007, my mother worked, she saved some money, and she wanted to pay back the loan, but she did not do this because my grandmother didn't want to take the money. So this was the first money that she saved in cash. Then she saved some more based on her activities. She was a prosecutor and then an attorney at law. And besides, she was receiving a pension. You have the calculations, but for 2008, the Commission had an error in calculation because my mother is receiving pension since 2004. I have the file based on which the pension was established in 2004, and I annexed the value starting the 1st of January 2008, 3,760 lei. And the Commission states that she was receiving this pension From the 1st of January 2008, the Commission referred to some electronic information that I checked, and there we only have the last 2 months from 2008, November and December. The others are not mentioned. I think this is the information. But we have this decision from the Social Payments Information System to have the pension for the whole year. It's not possible to not receive the pension if she was receiving the pension since 2004 or 2005. So this is an error in the calculations from the notification. Therefore, she saved money in cash. In the document that you are presenting, we have the allowance for the activity of 18 years in the prosecutor's office, and this was also part of the cash savings, 56,000 lei. Also at the beginning of 2008. So this was another source of income, just like the pension and the salary, which were present before also. And I presented detailed calculations according to the formula presented by the Commission, and we used mostly the same figures except the CEP. And I indicated the amounts. Later, in her activity as an attorney for my mother, I showed the amounts that were received according to her income declarations, and which were verified in the information that the Commission has, which was presented on the USB stick. But what was not taken into consideration was, I don't know what it is called, the exemption. For some years, she had some tax exemptions based on the expenditures that were accepted by the state tax service. So if we were to calculate the full income, this exemption was not taken into consideration, because I have specific information and I mentioned it. The figures are different. This is why I'm mentioning this. This is not that big and it doesn't change things essentially, but in some cases the information that I have is lower than the one identified by the Commission for incomes. For 2009, the Commission identified a higher amount for 1,000. Sometimes it differs. I don't know what's the problem with these figures, because they differ sometimes, but not essentially. The essence is not changing.
The savings, the money collected starting from 2009, I indicated calculations in detail. I did the salary, the fee from my activity as attorney at law, the pension, my mother's pension, which was paid for the entire period, the income to the work and travel program, and I calculated the incoming cash and outgoing cash, and I obtained almost the same amount. And the CEP, and I have a difference which is higher, that is indicated in the notification. According to the same formula that was used by the Commission for every year, I have identified the positive difference, which is in most part higher, much higher for every year, because the incoming cash flows or the cash savings for during 2008 or 9, they were in cash at that moment, because at that moment we had savings in cash. We did not use bank deposits. And the cash was kept exclusively by the person that was receiving the incomes, but this was not me. I could not be proud of having such incomes. And having this money accumulated for 2 years, in 2010, I was able to buy the car, including using the funds I had. the car I bought it for a price that was the market price. This is nothing special. I was employed at that time, and the procurement was in October, so not at the beginning of the year, but later on when we get some money already. And from that perspective, that deficit for 2010 it is due to the savings or money for the previous 2 years. But you have my detailed calculations in the document I sent you at midnight. Next, I even had a surplus of 140,000 lei, and even though if it covers this deficit, it still is a surplus. And this surplus was again in cash. It was cash kept by my mother at that moment, because at that moment in time, her health condition worsened. Essentially, she had strokes, or heart attacks, and even other health conditions that led her to stay even in hospitals for a few period of time, and the money was kept at home in order to avoid losing them. I was the child at that time and did not know how the money was used. Later on, she started to deposit money in banks, and which is shown in the information sent to the Commission. The Commission was offered all the information about my mother's bank deposits in 2012-13. Due to her worsened health condition, on her own decision, those deposits were withdrawn by her from banks, sent to me, and usually in the same branch of the bank, they were deposited in my name. So when in 2015, when there were...
Please, stop. My question was related to if, 2010. And now we continue. And let's talk about... Thank you for your answers about the salary of your mother and pension of your grandmother, savings before 2010. Let's continue now with the years 2013-2015. In the third round of question and answer, you stated that you and your mother had savings from the income earned in the years prior to 2013-2015 kept in cash at home. The Commission established that in the years prior, the years, your household recorded a positive balance of 11,377 lei in 2011 and a positive balance of 140,315 lei in 2012, where cumulative value being 151,692 lei. But we talk about misbalance. So, and Morva previously mentioned until 2010, your household expenses exceeded to income, but you explained us now. But now please focus on the years 2013-2015, and could you please explain how did you cover the overall negative balance of 313,007 lei in 2013-2015 in the circumstances? Is it again the same explanation through your figures, or this is something different?
It's the same explanation. I have submitted information and calculations subsequently. So we were collecting some money, and they were used for the procurement of some thing. And this was leading to some deficit in figures. Well, I could have invented some contracts or receipts, but there is no use of it. There's our money that we got. Honestly, you have information from banks. This is the money of myself or my mother. and the money that was put in deposits by my mother. So everything went subsequently. The money was collected subsequently. So the calculation that I sent you at midnight in detail indicate how the money was gathered and how this deficit was covered. Yes, indeed. At the end of 2011, there is a positive balance of 27,000. Later on, we had another positive balance of 140,000 lei. In 2012, we had quite high incomes from the activity of attorney at law. Take into account the tax exemptions, 167,000 lei was positive balance. And on the account of this positive balance, we had the cash savings. If we talk in figures, then we use specifically the figures, the statistics. But really, in reality, this is approximative, because you cannot mention how it was exactly. Income from some illegal activities we did not have. Some other illegal activities also we did not have. The expenses were covered by the income that followed. So we need to look also at the prior years and the positive balance due to which this negative deficit was covered. According to my calculations in 2015, at the end, the positive balance is 155,000 lei and more. So we accumulate money and then we cover the deficit. It's a usual thing that we do. Mr. Schibin, to clarify, could you please have a look at the table at point 59 for the year 2013? Do you agree with the amount of savings indicated there in the section incomes at the beginning of the year? Bank savings of 258,000, or did you have also cash savings?
Так.
Okay, let me find the respective point because it's a lot of figures. Okay, point 59. Okay, one other element that comes in evidence in this question of yours. In the first round of question, you asked myself to give information about a table in terms of what savings I did have. And I indicated for every year that, including 2013, I mentioned 0. But at that moment, you asked myself what I have. Later on in the assessment process, you've included as an assessed person together with myself, my mother also. But my mother did have cash savings, and the amount of the savings is not known to me. Yes, we discuss, we communicate. She asks me, how much do you need? But to know about the specific figure of her savings, I don't know. First of all, I was not asked before, and secondly, I did not give such information. So this would be like a gap that generated this difference. Therefore, cash savings, indeed, I did not have any, but cash savings were with my mother. And in the account of that, we do have these discrepancies. And if you can, yes, we got your idea. If you can notice, savings at the beginning of the year is 258,000. At the end of the year, this goes up to 445,000 lei. This includes also your your mother's savings, or also or only your savings. So the calculations probably to be like this almost. So the savings indicated for 2013, which were indicated in table 1 as the answer to the questions, were only my savings. My mother's savings were not reflected in any document, but the economies were present. So in that table, it's only data about your situation. in table point 59.
În punctul 59 se indică despre
At point 59, we talk about bank savings.
Так, iată, haideți să ne uităm.
Okay, let's have another look.
50.000 eu am avut depozit.
50,000 was my deposit, 104 was my mother, 100,000 is my mother. So it's two of my mother's and one of myself amongst these bank deposits.
Și include aici salariul meu.
Okay, it includes my salary. Yes, that's right. The rates, interests
Cu dobânzile eu
with the banks, maybe. I did not even challenge this. What you put there, I just let it go. I did not raise questions for this.
Iată la pensie. Da, pensie.
Now let's look at pension. Yes, it's right. The difference is 6 lei, but it doesn't matter.
Venituri avocat, la venituri
And
avocat, din informația
fees
care
as a lawyer or income from the activity attorney at law. In that sense, in my tax declaration and the information to the tax authorities and taking into account the tax exemptions of about 4,000 lei, I calculated more. So it's an amount deduced from those, the data from STS, which also is, information is present on the memory stick you gave me with the discovery file.
Calculele pe care eu le-am prezentat în explicațiile de aseară.
So this refers to the calculation I presented to you last
În
night.
principiu, deci cu sumele care le-am indicat.
So basically it's the same amounts I indicated here.
Da, și pe 2013, evident, dă un și conform calculului.
Obviously, according to my calculations, we have a negative balance of around 50,000. Yes, I confirm it's about 50,000.
Adică 2 zile eu am stat cu calculatorul.
So during 2 days, I stayed in front of my computer and calculated to do all the calculations and check all the declarations.
Do you have questions? Any questions? No more questions from my side. Thank you, Mr. Candidate, Mr. Schibin.
Do any other commission members have additional questions? Yes, Mr. Beaver.
Domnul Schibin, o întrebare mai mult de context.
Mr. Schibin, a question related more to the context. You have declared today that in general you have a modest way of life. I did used to have a modest way of life. And you gave some examples saying that you used taxi services only, for example, 5 times in your life. Could you tell us why did you use the taxis? The cabs. So I use the cab to go to the airport when we cannot use the car. Another time it was during the night when I came from the sea and the bus left us at the Economics University and we could not use the bus. Many times at night, given that we don't have buses available, I walked. So when I have the possibility, all the time I use the public means of transport. This was as an example, just for you to understand what I mean. So my wife tells me I am too greedy, I would say so.
Well, Judge, as I see that the commission doesn't have additional questions, let me ask, is there anything else you'd like to say before we conclude the hearing? Would you like to add to what you've submitted or make a brief statement of any kind before we conclude?
The explanations, I presented all of this in written form with in detail calculations about in relation to my opinion. Well, obviously, this is not a trial where we are in two sides, one side which analyzes the evidence. So I just presented the information, and there's the commission that says I accept or not the information presented by the candidates. In terms of declaration, I admit once again that I was not careful in that sense at the appropriate time 10 or 12 times ago when these things happened, but still the data I presented or identified by Commission from Public Sources allowed from real and objective data to determine the my assets, my wealth currently. Well, I admit I had some mistakes. I cannot correct them right now, unfortunately. That's it. Thank you very much for your attention. For the time, for myself, the patience that the Secretariat showed, and with whom we cooperated in terms of presenting the reports, the information, they were very open and very responsive to any of the questions or explanations I have had, and very punctual in time. Thank you.
Judge, we've come to the end of today's hearing. Thank you again for your submissions and answers to the Commission's questions. After the hearing, the Commission will adopt an evaluation decision stating its conclusion whether the subject meets the criteria for ethical and financial integrity under Law Number 26. The Commission will strive to complete its evaluation decision and announce its conclusion as soon as possible. It generally seeks to do so within a month after a subject's public hearing. This hearing is now closed. Good afternoon to everyone.